Yuki, how long are you going to keep playing games for? It was my mother's voice. Sighing, I reached out for the PlayStation Switch. The TV, which a moment ago my game had been on, switched to a noisy grey screen. And I'd just reached the good part too. I deliberately put the console away slowly and my mum stuck her head in from the kitchen. Yuki, hurry up and get to bed. Then, the wall clock chimed loud enough to scare me. It was 11 p.m. Ugh, look how late it is, my mother said exaggeratedly. Then she leaned forward mischievously. Don't come crying to me if the masked men come to steal you away because you were up so late. Masked men? How many years had it been since I last heard that term? It must have been in kindergarten. I had a picture book. I didn't remember what the title was or the finer details of the story. But there was one thing I did clearly remember. The masked men. The masked men had no face. Everyone looked the same. They all had the same strange silver mask. That was the face of the masked men. They didn't appear in daylight. Their time was after midnight, when everyone was asleep. And if you happened to see them, they would steal you away, and you would never return again. The simple scribble of the mask in silver crayon, its edges fuzzy. The cold mask, expressionless like ice. That picture was so strange that I could never forget it as a child. I was already 10 years old. But that fear I developed as a child still wouldn't go away so easily. But I didn't want to be treated like a child any longer, so I acted tough. What are you talking about? That's just a picture book tale. You were the one who cried when you were younger because you were so scared, my father said, making fun of me. I wonder if you're allowed to say that. My mother grinned. They really were making fun of me. I got angry. I'm going to bed. Good night, I said angrily and left the living room. I brushed my teeth and changed into my pajamas, and when I climbed into bed, it was already 11:30. I could hear the wall clock in the living room chime once. For some reason, today I wasn't tired at all. I turned in bed and looked at the window. Our apartment was on the 8th floor, so I could leave the curtain open and not worry that anyone was looking in. Darkness closer to deep blue than black came in through the window and filled the room. Everything was silent. It was like the blue darkness of night swallowed up all sounds. All throughout the house was strangely dead silent. Were my parents both asleep already? I couldn't sleep. I got into bed at 11:30. How much time had passed since then? How much longer until it was midnight? Maybe once 12 o'clock hit. If I was still awake by then, the masked men would... How stupid. There was no way that could happen. Shotaro would die laughing if he heard that. Kogure, you're such a scaredy cat. How old are you again? But what if? I wasn't sleepy at all. It would be easy to stay awake until midnight. But I decided to stay up until 12. 12 should have been just around the corner. What would I do if the masked men came to steal me away? No, there was no way that would happen. The pendulum in my heart swung wildly back and forth. What time was it now? How many more minutes until 12? I was too scared to look at the clock. Fear and curiosity, the pendulum swung incessantly between the two. How long did this go on for? Finally, I decided, and I reached out for the alarm clock by my bed. Right before my eyes, the fluorescent hands on the clock met. Midnight! At almost the same time, the wall clock in the living room chimed. I pulled the blanket up to my nose, wrapping myself up like a caterpillar, and listened closely. Was someone, the masked men, going to come? To the naughty child staying up late? To me? See? Were those soft footsteps in the hall? I couldn't hear anything. Nobody was coming. Jeez. So the masked men didn't exist after all. Of course they didn't. Why would they? They were just a picture book story. Yeah. I was a 4th grader now. What was I so afraid of? The moment I felt relieved, I noticed something strange. That familiar feeling, like itching beneath my belly button. Crap. I must have drunk too much juice when I was playing games before. I had to go to the toilet. The moment I thought it, the fear I had chased away came flooding back. I was safe and comfy in my bed. To reach the toilet, I had to leave here and walk down the cold hallway. How could I say that outside was as safe as in here? The masked men might not have come to my room, but that didn't mean they didn't exist. Maybe there was a large gathering of them on the other side of the door. Maybe going to the toilet was exactly what they were hoping for. The feeling of needing to go to the toilet got stronger and stronger. I could barely stand it. The more I thought about how I couldn't go, the more I wanted to go. Oh, what should I do? Only one thing was clear, and that was that I'd wet myself if I didn't move. I was scared of the masked men snatching me away, but if I wet myself, well, that was even scarier. You're 10 years old. My mother would no doubt get angry. Shotaro would laugh at me as well. It was no good. It was all I could think about. It was only a toilet. I had just reached the conclusion that the masked men weren't real. To wet myself because I was scared over that would be the most embarrassing thing of all. All right, I decided. I would go to the toilet. I quickly got up and quietly approached the door. The straight hall leading away from the door was covered in darkness. But my eyes had grown used to the dark, so there was no fear of bumping into the wall. I slipped out of my room. The house was quiet, as though everyone was dead. Everything was soaked in pure blue darkness. The lights, usually left on in the kitchen, were also off. I went to check my parents' bedroom. "Mom, Are you awake?" I opened the door slightly and called out. The lights were off. "Mum? Dad?" There was no answer. "Dad? Mum?" I wanted to cry. I just wanted them to say, "What are you doing at this time?" or "Hurry up and get to bed." Something normal that would put me at ease. But there was no response. Finally, I stepped into the room. "Mum!" I screamed and smashed the bed with both hands, but I couldn't feel anything under them. Panicking, I threw the blankets back. Nobody was there. The bed was cold. It wasn't like they'd just stepped out to go somewhere. "Mum? Dad?" What on earth had happened? Where had they gone? I knew they wouldn't be there in the dark, but I rushed to check the living room and kitchen anyway. They weren't there. "Maybe," I prayed, and rushed back to my room. Of course, they weren't there. More and more I wanted to cry. What on earth was going on? No way. Did the masked men... Did they take my dad and mum instead of me? No way, I thought. But even putting that aside, it was reality that I couldn't find dad or mum anywhere. I had to find them. I put my favorite stadium jumper on over my pajamas and left the house. Of course, I didn't forget to lock the door behind me. Nobody was on the elevator but me. Of course not. It was already after midnight. So I was shocked when I got off and went to leave the building. Someone was at the entrance. I couldn't see their faces because of the backlighting, but they were a couple. Dad and Mum? But they said nothing even as I approached them. Seemed they were someone else. I hid my face and passed by them. Then, "Hey, what are you doing?" They called out to me. Seemed like a young man. "You can't go outside at this time." Oh my, this child is still so small. The other person seemed like a young woman. I sighed in relief. Right as I was thinking about the masked men and my parents going missing, I was feeling rather helpless. I was so happy that they said something normal to me, like children shouldn't go walking around so late, rather than something strange. Oh yeah, they could help me look for my mum and dad. With some adults around, I could rely on them for all sorts of things. With that in mind, I looked up. Excuse me?" There were no words after that. In the light of the moon, I clearly saw their faces for the first time. They were the faces of the masked men. They were exactly the same as what I'd seen in the picture book when I was younger. Those cold, silver masks like ice. Wah! There was an awful scream. I realized it was my own voice. I fled from the building in terror. "Hey, kid, wait!" the man screamed. They were chasing me. I desperately ran down the empty road. I ran and ran and ran. How far did I run? At some point, I could no longer hear the man's voice. I leaned against a nearby pole to catch my breath. I felt both relief that I had escaped and an indescribable fear. The masked men were real. Even though it was night, streetlights shone here and there, making the roads bright. But because there were no people or cars, the roads looked completely different to usual. It seemed more like a TV set than real life. Then, I heard systematic footsteps. I quickly hid behind the telephone pole and peeked to see what it was. A man in a navy uniform passed by in front of me. A police officer. Was he on night patrol around the city? At any rate, I had to tell him about Mum and Dad, plus that strange masked couple. Although he probably wouldn't believe me. I went to call out to him. No, hang on. Maybe the officer was one of the masked men as well. That couple had proven that the masked men existed. I couldn't say for sure that the officer wasn't one as well. Or had what I'd just seen been a hallucination? I'd only seen it because I was thinking about them so much. I started to feel less confident about it. Yeah, there was no way a masked man could become a police officer. All the while, the officer was getting further away. If I didn't decide quickly, I'd lose sight of him. I decided to think about it a little more carefully. Was that officer one of the masked men too? Or was he not? As I debated what to do, the sound of his footsteps got smaller and then finally disappeared. Seemed he'd passed me by. Or so I thought, because the footsteps started to get louder again. Maybe he reached the divide in the road and had turned back. I hid behind the telephone pole again and peeked out. This time, with the officer walking towards me, I'd be able to check his face. I swallowed my breath. The streetlights shone brightly on his face. So he was a masked man. Perhaps ready for what I was about to see, I didn't scream, but the sight still chilled me to the bottom of my heart. What on earth was going on? No way. Was the town filled with masked men? While everyone was asleep, were they walking around like they owned the place? The masked man had a police uniform. He might even have had a gun. At this rate, it wouldn't be strange to assume they'd kidnapped my mum and dad as well. I had to get help, somehow. I had to find someone on my side. It was impossible for me to take on the masked men alone. Well then, who should I find? I quickly solved the problem. Shotaro. Not only was he a childhood friend, but he was my best friend. He would listen to me seriously and not make fun of me. He was a little rude, but he was a good guy at heart, and he was pretty smart and reliable too. His house wasn't too far away. It was just past the elementary school. I decided to go pay him a visit. The sound of my sneakers echoed on the empty night streets. I walked with my hands in my pockets, my mind full of the masked men. To start with, why did they even exist? What exactly were they? Aliens? Or yokai? I didn't know. Why did they only appear at night? Were they trying to take over the city? Or were they just living their lives quietly? I didn't know. I didn't know, but I couldn't stop the pounding of my heart. I felt like if I didn't do something, they'd do something terrible. I had to tell Shotaro everything, quickly, and get help for my mum and dad. Thinking, I looked at my feet while I walked. Then I realized there was another light on the road, different to that of the white street light. When I looked up, I saw the elementary school. The lights in the gym were on. Why were they on this late? In contrast to the dim street lights, they were bright orange and looked somewhat ominous. The other school buildings were completely dark, so the difference was creepy. I really wanted to know what was going on, but I had to go to Shotaro's house. I made my way towards Shotaro's house for now. I could go back to the school later with him. I made my way past the school and towards his house. Unlike mine, Shotaro lived in a detached house. I made my way to the front, but all the lights were off. Shotaro's room faced the backyard, so I couldn't see whether his light was on from the front. I decided to go around the back. A block fence surrounded the house that reached my chest. I'd be able to walk along it like a balance beam. Shotaro and I had often played on it, but it was rather different in the dark. I had to be careful not to fall. It took much longer than usual, but finally I reached the backyard. As I suspected, it was pitch black here too. Shotaro's curtains were pulled shut, and I couldn't see inside. I tried hitting Shotaro's window. I made a fist and softly knocked on the window glass. No response. I tried again, a little stronger this time. Silence. Was Shotaro not in his room? No way. The masked men hadn't gotten him too, had they? This was no joke. If they'd gotten Shotaro as well, then I had no idea what to do. How was I supposed to battle the masked men all by myself? I crouched on the spot, and all I wanted to do was cry. The masked men, the darkness, being alone, it was all too much to bear, and I was scared. If this was a bad dream, then wake me up. I was all alone here. That fear crushed me underfoot. What would happen to me? No matter how much I ran around, eventually the masked men would find me and catch me. Then, would they kill me? The policeman with his pistol. Bang! Or would they show me off? Put me in a cage, like a zoo, and put signs up. Rare beast, earthling, Kogure Yuki. Admission, adults 500 yen, children 300 yen. Warning, do not give food. Kogure? I panicked and turned in the direction of the voice. I'd been so absorbed in my stupid delusions that I didn't even notice. The window opened and a light shone out. Shotaro looked at me, annoyed in his pajamas. Shotaro! Thank God, he was okay. Things were massively different even with just one friend around. I was so happy I hugged his face tightly. Hey, let me go, let me go! He screamed. What on earth are you doing at this time of night? He asked, but first I climbed into his room through the window and then told him everything. I told him about the conversation with my mother, about the masked men, about staying up past midnight, about my parents disappearing, about the masked couple I saw, and the policeman. Shotaro didn't make fun of me. He crossed his arms and frowned, his face troubled. Finally, he spoke. "If you already know that much, there's no point playing any cheap tricks." What did that mean? What did he know? "Kogure, let's go to the school." School? Yeah, if we go there, it'll all be over. Come to think of it, the lights had been on in the school gym. Did that have something to do with all this? But I hadn't said anything to him about that. So then, why the school? Or was Shotaro a friend of the masked men as well? So I really was all alone? "What's wrong, Kogure? Let's go." Shotaro looked to be in an unusual rush. So he really was one of them? I decided to go to the school. Something was wrong. Doubting my close friend like that. So many strange things had happened in a row that my nerves were probably frayed. We headed towards the school together. We were finally about to go face to face with the masked men. Thinking about it, my shoulders tensed. "Hey, what are you nervous about? Relax, relax," Shotaro said without a care in the world. The black, towering school building looked bigger than it did during the day, like something scary. It didn't look like the place where we studied and played every day. We passed by the front of the school and walked towards the gym. The lights were still on and still bright. We took our position in the shade of the tree beneath the gym window. It would be dangerous to go in so suddenly, so first we had to watch what the enemy was doing. I extended my neck and tried to see inside. They were there, the masked men. I couldn't count how many. It was like all the masked men from town had gathered in the one spot. They were standing in lines, just like when we had school gatherings. They all had the same silver masks, but I could still tell their heights, genders, even ages apart. Old people, young people, middle-aged men, high school girls. There were so many. But there were no children. There was someone small, about my height, but they seemed older than me. What did it mean? Then, "What are you kids doing out here?" Someone called out. Crap! Did they find us? As expected, when I turned around, a masked man was there. Not just any masked man, but the police officer from before. I quickly hid behind Shotaro. He stood firm, with his feet set apart. I'd never felt more thankful towards my friend than in that moment. "Nothing." His voice was extremely calm. "We're leaving right now." "You should do that, because the meeting is about to begin." Having said that, the officer walked away. "Yes, thank you," Shotaro said. Strange. Something was strange. Why didn't the police officer try to do anything to him? Why? "Come on, Kogure, let's go." Shotaro turned around. His face. He had two thin, open lines where his eyes should have been, and he stared at me in the darkness. A large, V-shaped crack made a creepy, vague smile. This mouth didn't budge an inch as he spoke. The mask sparkled like cold silver, like expressionless ice. I didn't remember anything after that. When I came back to, it was morning. "Yuki, hurry up and get up." It was my mother's voice. Sighing, I sat up in bed. For some reason I felt lethargic and my head fuzzy. Like I'd had an oddly real dream. I didn't remember what it was about. All that remained was the memory that it had been an awful nightmare. "Go wash your face before breakfast." My mother called out again, and instinctively I touched my face. Huh? What was this? It was somewhat crackly. Like dried, stiff glue was stuck to my face. I tried running my finger along it. The glue-type substance was all over my face. Ugh, gross. What was this? I rushed to wash my face. I scrubbed my face with cold water and soap. Then I washed it again, just in case. After drying it with a towel, I finally felt fresh again. When I touched it with my finger, the weird feeling was gone. What a relief. I returned the towel to the rack and looked up. Wah! The very next moment, I screamed. An unbelievable sight looked back at me from the mirror. I was wearing my striped pajamas from the night before, but I didn't see a familiar face. What I saw was 2 hollow holes and a V-shaped mouth on cold silver. It was the face of a masked man. I suddenly remembered everything. Last night wasn't a dream? After I passed out, the masked men must have caught me and made me one of them. Was that how they increased their numbers? "Yuki, is something wrong?" I heard the sound of slippers. My mother was coming to check on me after hearing my scream. But how should I look at her when she arrived? She'd no doubt pass out seeing her beloved only son like this. What should I do? Her footsteps approached as I faltered. "Yuki?" There was no time to hide my face. I turned around to meet her, with my masked face. "Oh my, don't scare me like that," she said as though it were nothing. I was the one who nearly fainted. My mother's face. It was the same as mine. 2 expressionless masks lined up. Beneath them was the figure of normal humans. It went beyond strange into comical. "What's all this so early in the morning?" my father said from the living room. "Ah, Papa, can you come in here for a moment?" my mother said cheerfully. She was acting just like normal. I felt like I'd been left all alone. I was so tired. I didn't care what happened. So when I saw my father's face was that of a mask above his business suit, I wasn't even surprised. "Oh, has Yuki become an adult now?" He took one look at me and said, satisfied. My mother interjected from the side. "The Kiriyamas said it happened to Shotaro when he turned 8, but everyone turns at different times. 10 is still rather early. Yuki, here's a celebration gift. We've been looking forward to this day. My father handed me what he was holding. It was a small gift box. As you learnt today, this is our true form. But it would be meaningless for you to hear it from someone else. Everyone has to realize it for themselves. There are lots of people who still don't know, so we mustn't show our faces like this during the day. We'll continue like we have been so far, and that's why I've given you this. I tore off the wrapping and took out my father's gift. It was smooth and felt like rubber. It was folded. I opened it up. In my hands, I held my own face. No, a mask of my face. It had a composed, serious expression. My coreless, squishy face. Good, isn't it? We had this adjusted every year waiting for you to notice. My father's proud voice sounded far away. That was it. I couldn't bear it any longer. I threw the face and then passed out. Have you finally realized? Your true face.